The goddess I had a crush on for 5 years, Willow, got dumped. She was devastated. She asked me to drink with her. The corner of my lips curled upward. There was no way I'd miss a heaven-sent opportunity like this. I knew it. This was when a girl was at her most vulnerable. After being hurt by a scumbag, she would definitely become extra sensitive. So this time, I was going to become the gentle, caring perfect guy. I would comfort her, move her heart, and slowly make my way into it. I would make her believe in love again. But unexpectedly, after just 2 drinks, she dragged me straight to a hotel room. Although this was a little different from my original plan, as long as the result was good, that was all that mattered. However, I originally thought I had finally won over the goddess of my dreams and was about to begin my happy life. Who would have thought that when I woke up the next morning, the person beside me was gone. Only an envelope remained. White, thick, stuffed full. I froze for 2 seconds before reaching out to open it. A stack of cash, brand new bills. With one rough glance, there had to be at least 20,000 yuan. Am I worth that much? No. Wait, is this even right? Later on, I discovered something even more ridiculous. I had transmigrated into a trashy novel, and I was the simp male supporting role who bankrupted himself for the heroine. Fine, I'm done simping. But just when I started enjoying life with beauties in both arms and prepared to completely lie flat, she came back. Chapter 1. I was jolted awake by a splitting headache, the kind of pain that felt like someone was drilling into my temples with a power tool. I forced my eyes open. Above me was an unfamiliar ceiling, ivory white, with a crystal chandelier hanging in the center. The light pouring down stabbed at my eyes until they burned. A hotel. Fragments of memory slowly pieced themselves back together. Last night, Willow called me, her voice trembling with tears, saying she had broken up with Makoto. Willow, the woman I had secretly loved for 5 years. At the freshman orientation, she wore a white dress. The sunlight hit her at the entrance of the auditorium, and it felt like someone had smashed a baseball bat into the back of my head. I froze on the spot, even forgetting to carry the stool for military training. From that moment on, my college life as George revolved around 2 themes. One was studying, the other was Willow. The first existed to fool my mom, the second existed to fool myself. But she chose Makoto. Makoto, the son of the richest man in the city, 185 tall, drove a Porsche to class, and had the kind of face that could keep an entire girls' dorm awake at night. And me, 178 tall, rode a shared bicycle to class, and had the kind of face that reassured my roommates enough to sleep peacefully. This matchup had been unfair from the very beginning, so I spent 5 years being a simp. For 5 whole years, I saved seats for her, bought her breakfast, fixed her computer, helped her move dorms, unclogged drains, killed cockroaches, crossed half the city in torrential rain just to deliver her an umbrella. Every single time, she would smile and say, "George, you're such a good guy, a good guy." Those words were the gentlest rejection in the world. But last night, she called me. She said she was heartbroken. She said she wanted to drink. She said, "George, can you come?" Could I? I practically flew over there, and then, I turned my head. The bedsheets beside me were tangled in a mess, still carrying traces of warmth, but she was gone. There was only a white envelope beside the pillow, thick and stuffed full. I stared blankly for 2 seconds before reaching over to open it. A stack of cash, brand new bills. Just one glance told me there had to be at least 20,000 yuan inside. Wait, what? My brain buzzed. In that instant, I didn't feel anger or sadness, only an overwhelming sense of absurdity pouring from the top of my skull down to the soles of my feet. I, George, had spent 5 years simping for my goddess, and after one night tangled up together, she left me an envelope full of money and disappeared. I sat on the bed, staring at the pile of RMB for a long time. Then my phone screen lit up, a WeChat message, sent at 4:17 a.m. It was from Willow. "George, I'm sorry. My flight to Paris leaves early this morning, and I probably won't be coming back for a long time. As for last night, just pretend it never happened. Keep the money. Consider it repayment for everything I owe you. Repayment for everything I owe you." I tossed the phone onto the bed, and then something strange happened. An unfamiliar flood of information surged into my mind like a tidal wave. Not pain. Images. Huge amounts of them, dense, vivid, complete scenes flashing through my head like a movie on fast forward. I saw George's entire life. No, more accurately, I saw a novel titled The Tyrannical CEO Makoto's Exclusive Beloved. In this story, Willow was the heroine, Makoto was the male lead, and I, George, was the tragic male supporting role who simped from beginning to end. In the original story, after Willow left for France, George, me, went insane trying to contact her. He called non-stop, spammed her with messages, even borrowed loan shark money to buy a plane ticket to Paris. She never saw him. Instead, she got involved with a wealthy Chinese-French businessman, who just so happened to be part of a setup orchestrated by Makoto. George refused to give up. He spent every last cent he had and even shielded Willow from one conspiracy aimed at her. Willow was moved for exactly 3 seconds. 3 seconds. Then she went right back to entangling herself with Makoto. And George? Drowning in debt, hunted by collectors, his parents' house mortgaged away, his leg broken in a beating. In the end, he sat in a hospital hallway, staring at the engagement photo of Willow and Makoto on the news. He laughed until he started crying. The end. No bonus chapter. No epilogue. The author summed up his ending in one sentence. George disappeared from Willow's life, as if he had never existed at all. Chapter 2. I stared at the final line in my mind for about 10 seconds. Then I laughed. Not a bitter laugh, not a pained laugh. I genuinely thought it was hilarious. Fuck. I sat up from the bed, barefoot on the hotel carpet, and walked to the bathroom mirror. The person in the reflection had bloodshot eyes, cracked lips, and hair that looked like a rice field ravaged by a typhoon. But his eyes were frighteningly bright. George. I called my own name at the mirror. An echo answered me. All right then. I had transmigrated into a book. A melodramatic CEO romance novel called The Tyrannical CEO, Makoto's exclusive beloved. And I had become the most pathetic simp tool character in the entire story. My plotline was simple: simp until death, go broke until death, suffer until death. My only purpose was to use my own humiliation to highlight how amazing the male lead, Makoto, was. I took a deep breath. Then I picked up the envelope of cash and counted it bill by bill. 23,000. I neatly stuffed the money into my pocket. Then I picked up my phone, opened my chat with Willow, and stared at the words "just pretend last night never happened" for 5 seconds. My finger moved. Okay, have a safe trip. Sent. Then I deleted her from my contacts. Outside the window, the sunlight was perfect. Early summer wind squeezed through the half-open crack of the window, warm against my face. George, remember this. To hell with the plotline. To hell with the simp persona. To hell with love. I'm done simping. It was 10 in the morning when I left the hotel. The June sun was already brutal, hot enough to make the asphalt shimmer. Squinting against the glare, I hailed a taxi by the roadside and headed back to campus. Right, I was still a senior in college. More precisely, I had just passed my thesis defense, and graduation ceremony was next week. According to the original story, what should George be doing around this time? First, obsessively calling Willow, at least 30 missed calls a day, paired with 1,000-word WeChat essays ranging from "Are you okay?" to "I can come find you" to "Please, just reply to me." Basically a digital textbook on simping. Second, pestering Willow's best friend Maria for information, getting cursed out by her, and still smiling apologetically afterward. Third, borrowing money to buy a plane ticket. Good lord, just remembering those scenes made my knees ache with second-hand embarrassment. The taxi driver glanced at me through the rearview mirror. Kid, got dumped. I fell silent. Instinctively, I touched my face. The driver sighed sympathetically. That expression of yours, I've seen it plenty of times. You get in the car sighing, dark circles under your eyes, wrinkled clothes. Obviously spent the night outside somewhere. Young people need to learn to let go. There are plenty of fish in the sea. Sir, I said, leaning against the seat. I didn't get dumped. I just got hit with a stack of cash. Strictly speaking, I think I was more like, paid for. The driver slammed on the brakes. What the hell did you just say? I froze too. Okay, yeah, that really didn't sound right. Nothing, sir. Just drive. When I returned to the dorm, everyone in room 407 was there. David was sprawled on the top bunk gaming. Luis sat at his desk working on his thesis. The third roommate, Simon, was out on the balcony hanging up socks. I pushed the door open. David poked his head out, nearly dropping his phone. George, where the hell did you disappear to last night? We called you, texted you, almost called the cops. Then he got a clear look at my face, and his voice abruptly stopped. A second later, he spoke in an unnaturally gentle tone. You okay, man? Luis also turned around in his chair, adjusting his glasses carefully. How are things with Willow? He asked cautiously. They knew. When Willow called me last night, I had been gaming in the dorm with them. When I said I was heading out, David had even given me a thumbs up, basically saying, "Brother, your chance has finally come. Go get her." So now they were looking at me like I was the orphan child of a fallen martyr. The expressions on all three of their faces practically screamed, "He's too miserable. We need to give him some end-of-life care." Chapter 3. I walked to my desk, pulled out the chair, and sat down. Then I opened the drawer, dug out a pack of spicy strips, tore it open, and took a bite. Spicy. David hung halfway off the top bunk, hesitating for 3 seconds before asking, George, do you wanna talk about it? Talk about what? You know, last night. Oh, I chewed on the spicy strip and mumbled. She went to France. left me an envelope of cash, and bounced. The dorm went silent for 2 seconds. Simon turned around from the balcony, sock still in hand. Luis froze mid-motion while adjusting his glasses. David's mouth dropped into a perfect O shape. Cash. David's voice shot up an octave. What do you mean she gave you money? How much? 23,000. The three of them fell silent. David spoke first, sounding like a detective piecing together a criminal case. Wait, let me get this straight. You went out drinking with her. You spent the night together. Then she left you 23 grand and disappeared. Yep. George. David leaned over the edge of the bed with a solemn expression. Were you just kept as a sugar baby? Simon's sock dropped onto the floor. Luis shoved his glasses all the way onto his forehead. I was not a sugar baby, I said expressionlessly. She just. No. Hold on. David cut me off, jumping down from the bunk and grabbing my shoulders to shake me violently. 23,000. No offense, bro, but with your looks and body, I think you'd max out at maybe 2,300. I stared at him speechlessly. Was that really necessary? I'm helping you conduct market analysis, David replied seriously. Based on current market conditions, this was clearly an overpriced transaction. Simon quietly picked up his sock. David, can you speak like a normal human being for once? I am speaking normally. David started counting on his fingers. Think about it. George chased her for 5 years. He spent at least 30 or 40 grand on her by now. And she thinks one all-nighter is enough to settle the account with 23,000. He patted my shoulder. Brother, from an investment return perspective, you got scammed hard. I was speechless again, and I realized something. In the original novel, these three roommates were pure background characters. They didn't even have names. The book only ever said things like roommate A comforted him or roommate B told him to let go. But now, their mouths were way more vicious than the original settings implied. Luis finally asked a normal question. So what are you going to do? He paused. Go after her. All three of them turned to look at me at the same time. In the original plot, this was the moment George should have been standing there with red eyes, saying, I'm going to Paris to find her. I stuffed the last piece of spicy strip into my mouth, chewed it up, and swallowed. Then I said, I'm not going. I repeated myself. No chasing her down, no phone calls, no messages, no asking her friends for information. I brushed the chili powder off my hands. She left, but the money stayed. Works out great. I can use it to pay next month's rent. Dead silence. David reached over and touched my forehead. You don't have a fever? Nope. Then did a door slam your head or something? Nope. Did you slip in the hotel shower and crack your skull open? David gripped my shoulders, terror written all over his face. George, you simped for this woman for 5 years. 5 years. Over 1,800 days. And now you're telling me you're done. I looked him straight in the eye. David, what? Today, I suddenly realized something. What? Simping till the very end leaves you with absolutely nothing. Chapter 4. The dorm fell silent again. Out on the balcony, Simon clutched the basin of socks, his lips twitching slightly. Luis slowly pushed his glasses back down from his forehead onto the bridge of his nose. David let go of my shoulders, took a step back, and stared at me for several seconds. Then, he dropped to one knee, hands clasped together. George, he said in a trembling voice, you've finally awakened. I stared at him speechlessly. Can you not kneel? It's creepy as hell. 5 years, brother. David grabbed my pant leg, eyes turning red. Do you have any idea what the three of us felt every time you went out at midnight to bring her late-night snacks, help her move, or fix her computer? Simon raised a hand from the balcony. Heartbreak. Luis adjusted his glasses. Like watching a pig you raised willingly jump into a fire pit. You guys usually call me a pig. That's not the important part. David jumped to his feet and grabbed my arm. So excited he looked like he'd just won 5 million in the lottery. The important thing is that you finally came to your senses. Come on. Tonight we celebrate. My treat. Let's hit the barbecue stand. The last time you said my treat was freshman year. Simon reminded him. I forgot my wallet that time. Okay. David protested stubbornly. This time I'm definitely paying. Definitely. I leaned back in my chair, watching my three roommates practically dance with joy over the fact that I'd stopped simping. Honestly, there was a strange feeling in my chest that I couldn't quite describe. In the original novel, this was the point where George officially began his downward spiral. But me, I dug my phone charger out of the drawer, plugged it in, and opened WeChat. Willow's profile picture had already turned into a gray circle. Underneath it was the system message. This user has enabled friend verification. You are no longer friends. I deleted her first. She probably deleted me afterward too. Clean. Efficient. I tossed the phone onto the desk and stretched lazily. Outside the window, the cicadas screamed at the top of their lungs. From this moment on, George's fate had officially gone off the rails. Chapter 5. On graduation day, I stood on the campus field wearing my gown, taking photos with my three roommates. David had an arm slung around my neck, grinning like a weasel that had just stolen a chicken. Luis had actually taken off his glasses for once, squinting at the camera like some ancient artifact freshly unearthed from a tomb. Simon held up a selfie stick and took 7 or 8 pictures without managing to focus a single one properly. None of this existed in the original novel. The original George never attended graduation, because on that day, he was at the airport, using borrowed money to buy a plane ticket to Paris. But now, I stood beneath the blazing June sun, my graduation gown soaked through with sweat, yet my heart felt lighter than ever. After the photos, we headed to the cafeteria for one last meal. When we reached the entrance, I saw someone, Makoto. He stood beside the announcement board near the cafeteria entrance, talking to several men in suits. Sunlight hit the sharp angles of his profile. The shirt he wore clearly wasn't some cheap online purchase. As for the watch peeking out from beneath his cuff, I searched through the original story's memories. Patek Philippe Nautilus, probably worth 3 lifetimes of my salary. David leaned toward me and lowered his voice. Makoto, what's he doing here? Didn't he graduate 2 years ago? Alumni visit, Luis said, adjusting his glasses. His father donated a building to the school. He's here for the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Simon muttered. The world of rich people is beyond me. In the original story, this was an important plot point. On graduation day, George saw Makoto and rushed over to demand why he dumped Willow. Makoto sneered and said, she was nothing more than a toy. George instantly exploded with rage and swung a punch at him, only to get pinned to the ground by Makoto's bodyguards. Everyone outside the cafeteria saw it. A photo of George being restrained on the ground got posted into the alumni group chat with the caption, "The pathetic end of a simp," a classic public humiliation scene. And that punch was what made Makoto remember him in the first place. More than half of the retaliation that came later stemmed from that incident. So according to the original plot, what I should do now was rush over, confront him, get beaten up, publicly embarrass myself. I thought about it for a moment. Then I turned to David and said, "Let's go get food." As I walked past Makoto, he had just finished his conversation and turned his head. Our eyes met for 1 second. His gaze swept across my face without the slightest ripple of emotion, like he was looking at a tree by the roadside. Of course he didn't recognize me. In the original novel, he only remembered George after that punch. I gave him a small nod out of basic politeness, then walked straight into the cafeteria. Behind me, David tugged at my sleeve and whispered in a voice as tiny as a mosquito, "You're not gonna punch him." "Why would I punch him? He dumped Willow, aren't you? What does her getting dumped have to do with me?" David opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again, then closed it again, like a bass fish flopping helplessly on shore. "Simon," David finally said, turning toward him, "pinch me. I think I'm dreaming." Simon reached over and smacked him on the back of the head. I said pinch, not hit. Pinching takes too long. I carried my tray to a seat in the cafeteria and took 2 bites of braised pork ribs. Same terrible cafeteria ribs as always. "George," Luis said from across the table after hesitating for a moment, "have you really let her go?" I picked up another rib and bit into it. "Luis, let me ask you something." "What?" "If you chased someone for 5 years, fixed her computer for 5 years, unclogged drains for 5 years, delivered breakfast for 5 years, and then after she got dumped she called you out for drinks, spent one night with you, threw 23,000 yuan at you, and disappeared," I looked at him, "would you still keep chasing her?" Luis fell silent. David fell silent. Simon nearly choked on his rib. "When you put it like that," David scratched his head awkwardly. "Yeah, that's honestly messed up. She really didn't treat you like a human being. And the money you spent on her over those 5 years was way more than 23,000. Luis added while tapping away at a calculator app on his phone. "Rough estimate, including meals, gifts, transportation, and running errands, conservatively speaking, around 45,000. So basically," Simon swallowed his food and said, "not only did she not appreciate you, she still owes you another 22 grand. I stared at them speechlessly. "Can the 3 of you please stop analyzing my love life from an economics perspective?" "No." All 3 answered in unison. I laughed. Chapter 6. That meal was actually pretty enjoyable. Way better than the original plot, where George sat in the airport gnawing on bread while crying and trying to rebook flights. When we walked out of the cafeteria, I saw a crowd gathered near the entrance. Makoto had been stopped by a girl in a red dress. She held a bouquet of flowers in her hands, her voice loud and clear. "Senior Ito, I like you. Ever since freshman year, I've always." One of Makoto's bodyguards stepped forward expressionlessly and blocked her path. The bouquet smashed awkwardly into the guard's suit. The entire scene became painfully uncomfortable. David sucked in a breath. "So this is the world of rich people. You need to get through security before you can even confess your feelings. That's called advanced security protocol," Luis said while adjusting his glasses. I glanced at the scene once, didn't stop, and kept walking. In the original novel, George would have stood nearby watching all this, grinding his teeth while thinking, how could a guy like this ever deserve Willow? But the only thought in my head now was, I should go back and send out resumes. Graduation meant it was time to find a job. No way was I going to end up like the original George, throwing all my savings into plane tickets. Besides, that 23,000 yuan was honestly pretty nice. I pulled out my phone, opened a job search app, and started submitting resumes. In the age of information, efficiency was the real productivity. A simp doesn't exist anymore. Right now, I'm just a salted fish fully committed to lying flat and coasting through this ridiculous melodramatic novel. Chapter 7. During the first month after graduation, I did one thing using my knowledge of the original novel. I avoided every single plot landmine. In the original story, George spent his first month after graduation doing the following stupid things. First, asking Maria about Willow and getting cursed out. Second, contacting Willow's classmates in France and getting blocked. Third, going to a travel agency to ask about discounted flights to Paris and somehow getting sold overseas insurance instead. Fourth, posting a melodramatic status on WeChat saying I'll wait for you in Paris, only to get mocked by the entire school. Every single one was a public humiliation speedrun. So what did I do during this month instead? Sent resumes, went to interviews, got a job. I joined a small media company called Everblue Media as a social media operations specialist. Monthly salary, 6,000 yuan. Standard insurance and housing fund. Weekends off. Not much, but enough to survive. There was another new hire who started on the same day as me, Anna. On the first day of orientation, she wore a light blue shirt with her hair tied into a ponytail. The hem of her skirt swayed lightly as she walked. When she noticed that my desk was right beside hers, she smiled at me. Hi, I'm Anna Sue. Looks like we'll be co-workers from now on. I nodded. George Wong. Nice name. Thanks. My mom picked it. Her smile froze for a brief second. Okay, I admit it. 5 years of being a simp had completely destroyed my basic conversational skills. I could talk endlessly when it came to Willow, but with other girls, my social abilities crashed like a disconnected router. Still, whatever. Right now, I only had one core objective. Stay alive, live well, and avoid the original plotline at all costs. On my third day at work, something small happened. I was making coffee in the office break room when I overheard two co-workers chatting. You know, Everblue Media just landed a huge account. Brand promotion for the Ito Group. Ito Group? You mean Makoto Ito's company? Yeah, that rich second-generation heir. Apparently he just replaced the entire branding department and is looking for outside agencies everywhere. The coffee cup in my hand paused midair. My memories from the novel automatically kicked in. That's right. This was a mid-story plot point in the original novel. The Ito Group hired Everblue Media for a branding campaign. George became part of the execution team, recognized Makoto during the proposal meeting, lost control on the spot, and splashed coffee all over him. Then he got fired. Then he got slapped with breach of contract penalties. And then the snowball of misery officially began rolling downhill. I stared at the coffee cup in my hand and slowly set it down. So, has the project lead been decided yet? I asked casually. Not yet. The team leader said assignments will be discussed in next week's meeting. Good. Then my strategy was simple. Do not touch this project. Under no circumstances. Anyone else could take it, just not me. I would rather scrub toilets than appear in front of Makoto again. Chapter 8. The very next day, the team leader brought up the project during the morning meeting. The Ito Group branding campaign is the biggest account we've landed this year. We need someone creative to lead it. The team leader looked around the room. Anyone want to volunteer? I lowered my head and stared at my phone. Playing dead. George? I lowered my head even further. George, your resume said you managed a social media account with over 100,000 followers back in college. Why don't you give this project a try? Shit. I looked up and gave the most sincere smile I could manage. Team leader, I've only been here a week. I don't really have enough experience yet. I'm afraid I'll mess it up. Maybe one of the senior staff would be better. The veteran employee sitting across from me instantly lit up. The team leader hesitated for a moment. Fair enough. Then Shaoli, you take it. Shaoli slapped his chest confidently. No problem. Leave it to me. I quietly let out a sigh of relief. Crisis averted. What I didn't expect was that 3 days later, Shaoli got hospitalized with food poisoning from eating spicy hot pot skewers outside the university gate. The team leader panicked and called me out directly during the meeting. George, you're stepping in. No way. Team leader, it has to be you. The proposal meeting with the Ito Group is next week. You're the only one here with experience running a major social media account. Go prepare. No more excuses. I sat at my desk staring at the computer screen, feeling the pure malice of fate pressing down on me. Was the original plot auto-correcting itself? I had clearly avoided this landmine already, but destiny used one bowl of spicy hot pot skewers to shove me right back in front of Makoto. I turned and glanced at Anna at the neighboring desk. She was drinking yogurt through a straw, tilting her head while looking at me. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Why do you look like you're attending your own funeral?" "Anna, do you believe in fate?" She blinked. "No, neither do I." I turned back around and opened my PowerPoint presentation. "But fate seems to believe in me." Anna stared at me speechlessly. "What are you even talking about?" I didn't answer. If I couldn't avoid the plot, then I'd just change the way I played the game. In the original novel, George splashed coffee all over Makoto during the proposal meeting. So all I had to do was not bring coffee into the meeting room. Right? No coffee, just plain water. Even if plain water spilled on him, at worst it would be a little embarrassing. Nothing catastrophic. Wait, maybe I shouldn't bring any liquids at all. What if fate pulled some nonsense again and my hand suddenly twitched while holding a cup of water? Forget it. On the day of the proposal meeting, I wouldn't bring anything. No coffee, no water, empty-handed, going in bare-knuckled. I refused to believe that a trashy romance novel could really drag me headfirst into a flaming pit against my will. Chapter 9. The proposal meeting was scheduled for next Wednesday. Location, conference room, 37th floor, Ito Group headquarters. I spent 5 days preparing the proposal. Honestly, setting aside George's tragic role in this novel, the guy was genuinely capable. Back in college, he built a public account from scratch to over 100,000 followers. He had real talent when it came to social media strategy. The problem was that the original author designed him as a tool character. All of his talent existed solely to be suppressed and trampled on for dramatic effect. But now, I was the one using this character. I could use his abilities without walking his path. On Wednesday morning, I wore a clean white dress shirt and a tie. Anna tied it for me because after 3 attempts, I somehow kept turning it into a noose. "Are you going to a proposal meeting or trying to hang yourself?" Anna laughed so hard she had to squat down after seeing the disaster around my neck. "Shut up." She stood back up, fixed the tie properly, and patted my shoulder. "Good luck, George." The moment I arrived at the Ito Group headquarters, I could already feel the presence of money. The marble floors were polished enough to reflect people's faces. The receptionist's smile was so perfect it looked factory-made. Even the central air conditioning was set at the exact temperature that kept people alert without making them shiver. 37th floor conference room. The instant I pushed the door open, I saw Makoto Ito. He sat at the head of the conference table with 2 executives in suits beside him. In front of him sat a cup of coffee. I stared at the coffee for 3 seconds, then instinctively looked down at my own hands. Empty. Good. Safe. Everblue Media. Makoto's voice matched his entire presence, low, sharp, efficient, without any unnecessary emotion. "Have a seat." I sat down, opened my laptop, and connected it to the projector. The moment the first PowerPoint slide lit up, I noticed a subtle shift in Makoto's expression. He looked at me once, not like he was looking at a presenter, more like he was trying to remember something. Impossible. We only made eye contact for 1 second at graduation, and I never rushed him or punched him. In the original story, he only remembered George because of that punch. Without it, I was just another passerby. I steadied my breathing and began the presentation. Honestly, the proposal was solid. Combining my knowledge of the Ito Group's brand positioning from the original novel with my own experience in social media operations, I proposed a strategy centered around short video content networks combined with event-driven topic marketing. By slide 7, the executives across from me had started nodding. By slide 12, they had started taking notes. And when I reached the final slide, "Good proposal," Makoto finally spoke. Just 3 words, but the atmosphere in the room visibly relaxed. The executives beside him exchanged glances, both wearing expressions that clearly said, "The boss is satisfied." I closed my laptop and stood up. "Then we'll follow up on the details by email." After saying that, I turned and headed for the door. Clean, efficient, not lingering for even 1 extra second. How did George ruin this scene in the original novel? The moment he recognized Makoto, he lost emotional control, shouted, "You're the bastard who dumped Willow," threw coffee in his face, got dragged out by security, publicly condemned by the company, and destroyed his own career. But me. The proposal passed successfully. I hadn't brought a single liquid into the conference room. I didn't recognize anyone, and I didn't say one unnecessary word. Perfect. Chapter 10. By the time I reached the elevator, I finally let out a breath of relief. My heartbeat was still a little fast. My palms were sweaty, but at least my face stayed calm. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the first floor. The doors were just about to close. A hand reached in from outside and stopped them. Makoto walked in. No executives behind him. No bodyguards. Just him alone. The elevator doors shut. Only the 2 of us remained. 37 floors. What's your name? He suddenly asked. My back stiffened for a split second. George Wong. George Wong. He repeated the name slowly, like he was testing the sound of it. Your proposal had some interesting ideas. Thank you. Silence lasted for 2 floors. You graduated from H University? He asked again. Yes. This year? Yes. Then he asked. Do you know Willow? My heart clenched like someone had grabbed it with a fist, but my expression didn't move at all. Not really, I replied calmly. H University has a lot of people. Makoto turned his head and looked at me for 1 second. Then he nodded. Just one sound. The elevator reached the 1st floor, and the doors opened. I stepped out. George. His voice came from behind me. I stopped walking but didn't turn around. He said. Pleasure doing business with you, I replied. Likewise. The moment I walked out of the Ito Group building, the scorching June heat crashed into me, instantly drying the cold sweat on my back. My phone buzzed. A WeChat message from David. Holy shit, George, you actually went to Makoto's company for a proposal meeting. Your coworker posted about it. I saw everything. Tell me you didn't rush over and punch him. I typed back. Nope. The proposal got approved. David immediately replied. What the fuck? Wait. Hold on. You're telling me you met face to face with the guy who dumped your goddess, and you didn't explode, didn't lose control, and actually closed a business deal with him? Yeah. David replied again. Did someone swap you out with a different person? I slipped my phone back into my pocket. No. I hadn't become a different person. I just no longer wanted to be the idiot who destroyed his entire life for a woman. In the original novel, George had already started falling apart by this point, but me. I had just landed the first major client of my career. Chapter 11. The project progressed smoothly. The branding proposal I created received excellent feedback inside the Ito Group. My team leader praised me twice during the weekly meeting and even hinted that I might get promoted to full employee status ahead of schedule. By my 2nd month at the company, my salary had gone from 6,000 yuan to 8,000. Sure, compared to the kind of pocket change Makoto casually tossed around, it was still the difference between underground and outer space, but for an ordinary fresh graduate, it was already a pretty solid start. More importantly, the original plot was shifting. In the novel, this was the point where George should have already lost his job, fallen into debt, and started borrowing money everywhere. But not only had I kept my job, I was doing better and better. Butterfly effect. The moment I stopped following the plotline, the entire story started changing with it. The clearest example was this. In the original story, because George offended Makoto during the proposal meeting, Everblue Media lost the Ito Group contract. The company suffered heavy losses. George got fired, and eventually the whole company collapsed. But now, not only did we keep the contract, the Ito Group even increased the budget. Everblue Media instantly transformed from a tiny struggling company into a rising agency backed by a major client. Even my team leader walked around with extra swagger now. At noon that day, Anna and I went to a noodle shop near the office. She sat across from me, stirring her noodles with chopsticks. After hesitating for a long while, she finally spoke. George, can I ask you a personal question? Go ahead. Do you have a girlfriend? My chewing slowed for a second, then continued. No. What about before? Nope. Then, she poked at the chopped green onions floating in her bowl. Have you ever liked someone? I looked up at her. A faint blush had appeared on Anna's face. Or maybe it was just the steam from the noodle shop. It was pretty hot in here. I thought for a moment before answering. I did once, but it was like winning the lottery. Once you cash out the prize, the ticket should probably be thrown away too. Anna froze briefly. Then she laughed. You talk so strangely. I've always been like this. No. She shook her head. Normally you talk like a router with bad internet. People ask one question. You answer one sentence. And sometimes you even lag. But just now, that line came out surprisingly smooth. I said. Maybe I ate too many noodles. Cleared the blockage. Can you be serious for once? I'm always serious. She glared at me before lowering her head and aggressively slurping a mouthful of noodles. This scene didn't exist in the original novel, because the original Anna never really appeared at all. She was just an NPC-level background character who disappeared completely after George got fired. But now, because I hadn't been fired, she had become my coworker sitting beside me every day. She tied my ties for me, brought me breakfast sometimes, and when I worked late, she would quietly place a cup of tea on the corner of my desk, just like, forget it. These days, I'm allergic to the word like. The symptoms include acid reflux, pressure in my temples, and an overwhelming urge to pull out my phone and dial emergency services. On the walk back to the office after lunch, my phone buzzed with a message from an unfamiliar number. Is this George? I'm Maria, Willow's friend. I stared at the screen for 5 seconds. Here it comes. Chapter 12. Maria, Willow's friend. In the original novel, this was around the time Maria would call George just to curse him out. Because George kept obsessively contacting Willow until her friends in France got annoyed enough to complain to Maria. But I hadn't contacted Willow, not even once. So why was Maria reaching out to me first? I hesitated for a moment before replying. Yeah, it's me. What's up? The typing bubble on the other side blinked for a long time. Then Maria sent. Willow asked me for your contact info. That's when I found out she deleted you. She hasn't been doing very well lately. She asked whether you'd called her at all. I stood at the side of the road holding my phone while the sunlight softened the asphalt beneath my feet. Willow was looking for me. In the original novel, Willow would never have gone looking for George at this point, because George was the one constantly chasing after her. She never needed to search for him. But now, I hadn't called once, hadn't sent a single message, and suddenly she was panicking. Interesting. I thought for a while, typed out several words, deleted them, typed again, deleted again. In the end, I sent only one line. Sorry, I've been pretty busy with work lately. Tell her I'm doing well, and she should take care of herself too. After sending it, I locked the screen and slipped my phone back into my pocket. Anna leaned over beside me. Who was that? You spent forever typing. Telemarketer. A telemarketer using WeChat. I answered. Modern scammers evolve with the times. Anna rolled her eyes. That night, I lay in bed in my apartment staring at the ceiling. In the original novel, after Willow went to France, she became involved for a while with a wealthy Chinese-French businessman. But that businessman was actually working for Makoto. The whole thing was a setup. Makoto dumped Willow, but he never truly let her go. He needed a chess piece to monitor her movements in France while also exploiting George's simp mentality for free labor. By the middle and later parts of the story, Willow finally discovered the truth, but by then, George had already been driven into a dead end. She regretted it, but it was too late. The original George had already shattered completely. I turned over in bed. Moonlight slipped through the crack in the curtains, drawing a pale white line across the floor. Regret. In the original novel, by the time you regretted everything, he had already been destroyed by you. But in this world, before you even get the chance to regret it, I've already decided not to give you that opportunity. I closed my eyes. My phone screen lit up once more. Another message from Maria. Willow said, you weren't like this before. She asked if you're angry at her. I didn't reply. I turned over again and shoved the phone beneath my pillow. Outside, the cicadas screamed through the entire night. Chapter 13. Time moved into August. I officially became a full employee at Everblue Media, and my desk got moved from the corner to a spot by the window. The Ito Group project was thriving, and because of it, the company landed several additional mid-sized clients. My title also changed from social media operator to project supervisor. Monthly salary, 12,000 yuan. Sure, in this city, 12,000 mostly just meant paying rent and finally being able to eat decent food once in a while. But compared to the original George, who, at this point in the novel, was already drowning in hundreds of thousands of yuan in debt, it was heaven and earth apart. The butterfly effect kept spreading. I never went to Paris to look for Willow. Willow never received George's endless phone bombardment. That wealthy Chinese-French businessman never got the chance to use George as a pawn. Makoto's carefully arranged scheme was slowly collapsing because it lacked one key ingredient: a useful idiot named George, and Willow. According to the occasional updates Maria sent me later, life in France wasn't going well for her. Language barriers, no familiar faces, overwhelming research pressure. Most importantly, she realized something was off about the Chinese-French businessman she coincidentally met, but she couldn't figure out exactly what. In the original novel, George flew to France and uncovered the truth for her, but this time, no one was helping her anymore. Sometimes late at night, Maria would forward me messages. Willow asked about you again today. She said she dreamed that you were waiting for her at the airport. Are you really never going to contact her? My replies never changed. No. Tell her I said take care. Then I would go right back to working overtime. One Friday night in mid-August, David suddenly exploded into the group chat. Barbecue tonight. The old shop's getting demolished. Last chance ever. Everyone better show up. Simon, on my way. Luis, coming. At George, don't you dare say overtime. It's Friday. I glanced at the unfinished scheduling spreadsheet on my screen. Then I closed the computer and replied, coming. The barbecue place was hidden in the alley behind the university. The owner's surname was Mao. He had a giant gold tooth, and he'd been grilling skewers for 30 years. By the time I arrived, the three of them were already seated. David had already opened 2 beers. Simon was devouring skewers. Luis was staring at his phone. The moment they saw me, David waved enthusiastically. He's here. He dragged over a chair for me. Sit. I sat down, grabbed a beer bottle, and popped the cap off with my teeth. The first gulp of ice-cold beer instantly washed away half the August heat. George, David said, throwing an arm around my neck while reeking of alcohol. What's your monthly salary now? 12,000. Holy shit. David's eyes widened dramatically. You only graduated 2 months ago. Got lucky. Landed a major client. What client? I paused briefly before answering. The Ito Group. Beer nearly shot out of David's nose. Simon dropped his skewer onto the table. Luis finally looked up. Wait. David said while wiping beer foam off his mouth. The Ito Group. As in Makoto Ito's Ito Group. You're working for Makoto now. Not working for him. Agency partnership. David wore the expression of a man watching an incomprehensible art film. George, the woman you secretly loved for 5 years got played and dumped by this guy, and now you're making branding proposals for his company. Yep. You don't think there's something wrong with that? What's wrong with it? I bit into a lamb skewer. They pay well. David opened his mouth, then closed it again. Simon picked up the skewer he dropped, wiped it off silently, and kept eating. Luis adjusted his glasses, typed something into his phone, then turned the screen toward me. It read, "Are you really George? Or did an alien wear George's skin?" The George the first knew could never do this. I am George, I said before taking another drink of beer. Just a George who finally figured things out. Luis stared at me for a long time, then lowered his phone and quietly said, That's good too. Coming from the most rational person in the dorm. That was the highest praise possible. Halfway through the barbecue, my phone rang. Unknown number. International country code. Chapter 14. France. I stared at the screen for 3 seconds. David leaned over and saw the number 2. His expression instantly changed. Is it her? He asked. I didn't answer. I silenced the call. The ringing stopped, then started again. I silenced it again. 3rd time. 4th time. David completely forgot about his barbecue skewers and stared at the flashing number starting with +33 like he was watching a horror movie. On the 5th call, I answered. Hello. The other end went silent for 2 seconds. Then a voice came through, carrying a hint of nasality, a little hoarseness, and cautious uncertainty. George? It was Willow. I hadn't heard her voice in over 2 months. Back then, hearing that voice would make my heartbeat race, my palms sweat, my brain short-circuit. But now, nothing. Just the smell of barbecue smoke drifting through the night air. Yeah, I'm here, she asked softly. How have you been lately? Pretty good. You? Her voice paused briefly. I'm okay. Several seconds of silence passed. Then she spoke again, a little faster this time. George, I sent you so many messages, but you never replied. Later I found out you deleted me. Are you angry at me? Beside me, David started making frantic facial signals, his mouth clearly screaming, Hang up, hang up. Simon froze mid-bite with a skewer still suspended in the air like a statue. Luis removed his glasses, wiped them slowly, then put them back on. I leaned against the cheap plastic chair with a beer bottle in hand. I'm not angry. Then why did you? Willow, I interrupted gently. How's life in France? How are your studies? They're okay. That's good. George, I interrupted her again. I've been pretty busy lately. Just joined a company doing brand marketing. My tone was calm, casual, like discussing the weather. I'm having barbecue with friends right now. They're waiting on me. The other end fell silent. Silent for a very long time. Long enough that David craned his neck over, thinking the signal had died. George. Willow called my name again. What is it? You've changed. When those words came through the speaker, her voice trembled. Not the kind of trembling caused by cold. The kind that comes when you think something will always stay where it is, and suddenly realize it's gone. But all I did was hum lightly. Have I? Maybe. People grow up eventually. Her voice tangled with hesitation. But I interrupted her a 3rd time. Willow, take care of yourself. I lowered the phone from my ear. Then I said, seriously, take good care of yourself. And I hung up. Barbecue smoke drifted above our heads. David, Simon, and Luis all stared at me like they were looking at a stranger. I picked up the beer bottle and took a long drink, then let out a burp. Another 10 beef skewers. I called out. Extra spicy. David finally snapped back to reality and slammed the table. Holy shit, George, you really awakened. He shouted so loudly that even the old man at the neighboring table turned to look at us. Simon silently took another bite of his skewer. Luis pushed his glasses up slightly, the corners of his mouth lifting just a little more than usual. The barbecue lasted until midnight. Empty beer bottles piled beneath the table like a miniature mountain. On the walk back, David was completely drunk, hugging a street lamp while singing breakup songs at the top of his lungs. Simon dragged him forward by force. Luis walked beside me at the back while moonlight scattered silver across the pavement. George, yeah. You did the right thing. I smiled faintly. Whether it was right or wrong didn't really matter. What mattered was this. Before loving someone else, learn to love yourself first. I didn't want to become the kind of person who sacrificed his entire life just to play a supporting role in someone else's story anymore. Chapter 15. September arrived. Autumn came with it, bringing a faint chill into the air. Everblue Media had become well known because of the Ito Group project, and more clients started landing on my desk. I even began managing my own team. Anna got assigned to my group. Her desk sat directly across from mine, and every morning she would leave a cup of Americano on my desk after discovering I'd quit all sugary drinks. "Are you cutting weight lately?" she asked one morning. "No," I replied. "I just feel like drinking something bitter." "That's such a weird reason. Bitter things keep people awake." She didn't ask further, but the next day, the Americano became a double espresso. It was unbelievably bitter. Bitter enough that I suspected she was secretly taking revenge on me for something. In the middle of September, something unexpected happened. The head of the Ito Group's branding department invited me to dinner. Not a business dinner, a private one. The restaurant was a high-end Japanese place where the average meal started at 800 yuan per person. By the time I arrived, Director Song from the branding department was already seated inside the private room. "Supervisor George, come, sit." He sounded strangely enthusiastic. "I invited you here today because there's something I'd like to discuss. Please go ahead." Director Song. "Well," he lowered his voice. "President Ito has been extremely satisfied with your proposals. He's mentioned your name privately several times." My chopsticks paused. "President Ito believes you're talented. Too talented to stay buried in a small company." I slowly put my chopsticks down. "What exactly are you implying?" Director Song. "President Ito wants to recruit you." He smiled. "Deputy Director of Branding. Starting annual salary, 600,000. My mind buzzed. 600,000. Right now, even at full calculation, my annual salary barely reached 140 or 50,000. This was more than 4 times the jump, but right after that buzzing came another cold voice. The voice of the original novel's memories. Near the end of the original story, after Makoto pushed George into absolute despair, he had also offered him a similar deal, work under him in exchange for completely cutting ties with Willow. That was the embodiment of Makoto's possessiveness. He wanted everyone connected to Willow to become pieces on his chessboard. Sure, the current situation was different. I wasn't threatening Makoto, and I had no involvement with Willow anymore. But the timing and nature of this offer still made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Director Song. I lifted my teacup and took a sip. "Please thank President Ito for thinking so highly of me. But I've only just found stable footing at Everblue Media. Leaving now wouldn't really be appropriate. The salary can still be negotiated. It's not about the money." I placed the teacup down. "I think staying on the agency side exposes me to more industries. Broader perspective." That was the most polite rejection I could think of. Director Song's smile stiffened briefly before recovering. "Well then. No pressure. But President Ito's offer will remain open. Supervisor George is welcome to reconsider anytime." "Understood. Thank you." By the time I stepped out of the restaurant, night had already fallen. The autumn wind drifted through the streets carrying the faint scent of osmanthus flowers. I stood by the roadside for a while and lit a cigarette. I didn't smoke, but the body I inherited from George still retained the habit. Whenever stress piled up, there would occasionally be an urge for one. My phone buzzed. A message from Anna. "Finished with overtime. I'm downstairs at the office. Want to walk together?" I crushed the cigarette out immediately, then replied, "On my way. When I got downstairs, Anna was standing beneath a street lamp waiting for me. The autumn breeze had loosened a few strands of her ponytail, and she was tucking them behind her ear with one hand. The moment she saw me, she smiled. "Have you eaten?" "Yeah. Client dinner. Japanese food." I looked at her in surprise. "How did you know?" She reached out and brushed lightly against my sleeve, rubbing her fingertips together. "You got wasabi on your cuff, and you smell like smoke." She wrinkled her nose slightly. "Since when did you start smoking?" "Only occasionally. Smoke less." "Got it." We walked side by side down the street outside the company building. The streetlights stretched our shadows long across the pavement, one ahead of the other. After about 5 minutes, she suddenly spoke. "George." "Yeah. Have you been worrying about something lately?" I glanced at her. "What makes you ask?" "You've been working more overtime lately, but your actual workload hasn't increased that much." She kept her eyes on the road as she walked. "And before you went to dinner tonight, you stared at your phone for a really long time." This woman's observational skills were honestly terrifying. "It's nothing major," I said. "Someone tried to poach me. I was thinking about it." "You're leaving." Her footsteps paused slightly. "No." "Then what are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking about whether my reasons for staying are strong enough." Chapter 16. She stopped walking and turned to look at me. The streetlight above cast shadows from her eyelashes across her cheeks. "I think your reasons are strong enough," she said. I tilted my head slightly. "Why?" "Because." Her gaze flickered away for a moment before she continued. "Because your team finally finished settling in together. If you leave, everyone would have trouble adjusting." That's it. That's it. She turned around and kept walking, but her pace was noticeably faster than before. I watched her back and unconsciously smiled a little. In the original novel, George only ever loved one person in his entire life, and that person dismissed him with a stack of cash. But now, someone was standing beneath a street lamp late at night telling me that my reasons for staying were enough, even if she probably didn't realize what she was actually saying. I realized it. National Day holiday arrived. At this point in the original novel, George should already have been $50,000 deep in debt, chased by debt collectors, with collection notices pasted onto his parents' house. Meanwhile, I was at home eating the braised pork ribs my mom made. My mom cooked in the kitchen. My dad watched the news in the living room. The pothos plant by the window had grown wildly, its vines hanging all the way down to the floor. Everything felt so peaceful it almost seemed unreal, but the peace shattered on the third day. I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone when I saw a new social media post. Maria had posted it. The attached photo was an airport terminal. The caption only had a few words. "She's back." Someone in the comments asked who had returned, but Maria never replied. Still, I knew. Willow. She came back to the country. In the original novel, Willow only returned a year later, after George had already been driven into absolute ruin. She came back because she discovered Makoto's scheme and wanted to confront him personally. But now it was only October. She had been gone for less than 4 months. Why had she returned early? The answer arrived that very night. Maria sent me a WeChat message. "George, Willow came back. She wants to see you." I sat in my childhood bedroom staring at the message for a full minute. Then I typed, "Why?" "Maria, she said there are things she wants to tell you in person." "George, I know she did a lot wrong before, but she really hasn't been doing well lately. If you have time, could you meet her once?" I didn't reply immediately. I set the phone down and walked over to the window. The night sky back home was much cleaner than in the city. Stars spread densely across the darkness. In the original novel, when Willow returned and searched for George, she came carrying guilt and gratitude, because George had emptied his life savings and flown to Paris to save her from disaster. But this time, why was she looking for me? Because I didn't chase her, didn't call, didn't text, didn't fly to Paris, didn't borrow loan shark money. She had grown used to being simped over. Used to George always standing behind her, always available on command, always giving unconditionally. And when all of that suddenly disappeared, she panicked. That wasn't love. That was simply the withdrawal reaction of someone who had grown accustomed to being worshipped after suddenly losing the person who supplied it. Chapter 17. I took a deep breath, picked up my phone and replied, "I'm going back to work after the holiday. We'll talk then." Then I turned my phone off and lay back on the bed. There was a thin crack running across the ceiling. It had been there since I was a kid, and nobody ever fixed it. On October 7th, I returned to the city where I worked. That same afternoon, after dropping off my luggage, I went straight to the office and worked overtime for half a day. By the time I got back to my apartment that night, I boiled some water and made instant noodles. The noodles hadn't even softened yet when the doorbell rang. I assumed it was the neighbor next door coming to borrow seasoning again. Last time he borrowed a bottle of vinegar and never returned it. I opened the door. It wasn't the neighbor. It was Willow. She had lost weight. A lot of weight. Her collarbones stood out sharply, and the flesh on her face had thinned noticeably. She wore a gray coat, her loose hair blowing messily in the wind. In her hand was a paper bag printed with the logo of a French dessert shop. She looked at me, lips moving slightly. "George." I stood in the doorway holding the doorknob. Behind me drifted the smell of instant noodles, pickled mustard flavor. The two of us stared at each other through the open doorway for about 5 seconds. Then I stepped aside. "Come in." She entered and looked around. The apartment wasn't big. 1 bedroom, 1 living room. Most of the furniture was old junk left behind by the landlord, but I kept the place reasonably clean. The bowl of instant noodles on the table was still steaming. The moment she saw it, her eyes reddened slightly. "You eat this now?" she asked softly. "It tastes pretty good. Want one?" "George, yeah. You never used to eat instant noodles. You always said they weren't healthy. People change." She placed the paper bag on the table. Her fingers gripped the handle so tightly her knuckles turned pale. "I brought you macarons. You once said you wanted to try authentic French dessert someday." I glanced at the bag. "Yeah, I did say that once. Back in sophomore year." She posted a photo from a French dessert shop on social media, and I casually commented, "Maybe I'll get to try real French dessert someday." She remembered it all the way until now. "Thanks." I took the bag and set it aside. Then I sat down and continued eating my instant noodles. Willow stood silently in the middle of the living room watching me eat for nearly a full minute. Then she slowly walked over and sat down in the chair across from me. "George, about that night." "Which night?" "That night in June." She lowered her head. "I shouldn't have left the money behind." My pace eating noodles didn't change. At the time, she continued quietly, my mind was a mess. I had just broken up with Makoto, and my head was full of confusing thoughts. When I asked you out for drinks, I really just wanted someone to talk to, but later we drank too much, and then we, The next morning when I woke up and saw you sleeping beside me, I panicked. Her voice grew softer and softer. I didn't know how to face you. You treated me so well, and I was afraid I had used you, so I left. I left the money because I was afraid you'd think. I asked. Think what? That I took advantage of you. I put down my chopsticks, then looked up at her. Her eyes were red. The tip of her nose was red too. Her lips were pressed tightly into a thin line. She looked exactly like the Willow from the original novel, the one standing at the airport waiting for George to come pick her up, only to wait forever. Except now the roles had reversed. She was the one chasing after someone. Willow, have you ever thought about something? What? You said you left the money because you were afraid I'd feel used. I looked at her calmly. But did you ever think about what that stack of money meant to someone who loved you for 5 years? Her shoulders trembled slightly. My voice stayed even and quiet. It meant that after 5 years, you put a price tag on my feelings. 23,000 yuan. Chapter 18. Her tears fell silently, drop by drop onto the sleeve of her gray coat, spreading slowly like ink bleeding across rice paper. I didn't. I know you didn't mean to. I interrupted softly, but the result is still the result. The room fell quiet again. Steam from the instant noodles drifted across the table before fading away. Outside the window came the noisy sounds of the barbecue stall downstairs. George. She lifted her head, the bloodshot veins in her eyes painfully obvious. What if I said? I regret it. I looked at her, at the face I had secretly loved for 5 years. In countless late nights buried within George's memories, this face had been the moon, the stars, the only source of light in every darkness. But the moon never belongs to anyone. What do you regret? I asked. Regret. Her throat seemed clogged with something. Her voice rough as she forced the words out. Regret not seeing you sooner. Regret leaving that money behind that morning. Regret. She sniffed quietly. Regret that while you were always standing behind me, all I ever did was keep looking ahead. If these words had appeared in the original novel, they probably would have shown up in the second-to-last chapter. At that point, George would already have been lying in a hospital bed with broken legs, empty bank accounts, and parents whose house had been frozen by the bank. Willow would stand in the hospital doorway wearing a white dress and say these exact things. And George would smile and answer, "It's okay." Then the story would end. Fuck. What a garbage ending. Willow. I heard everything you said. A flicker of hope appeared in her eyes, but I raised my hand slightly, stopping whatever she was about to say next. However, the light vanished instantly. I need time. She froze. I'm not rejecting you, I said calmly. I just need time to figure some things out. And you need time to figure some things out too. What things? She asked quietly. You need to figure out whether you regret things because you finally realized George was good to you. I looked directly at her. Or because George stopped chasing you. That sentence struck like a needle, piercing something precisely. Her body stiffened slightly. Then she slowly lowered her head. Is there really a difference? She asked in a tiny voice. There is. I leaned back in my chair. The first is love. The second is unwillingness to lose. Wind poured in through the window, making the curtains flap loudly. Willow sat there silently, for a long time, long enough for the instant noodles to go cold. Eventually, she stood up and picked up her bag. When she reached the door, she turned back one last time. George, yeah. If, she hesitated, if I figure it out someday, will you still be there? I leaned against the chair and looked at her. I don't know. It was an honest answer. She nodded softly, opened the door, and walked out. The moment the door shut, I heard an incredibly faint sound of sobbing from the hallway. I carried the cold instant noodles into the kitchen and dumped them into the trash. Then I opened the paper bag from the French dessert shop. Inside were 6 macarons lined up neatly, pink, purple, green, yellow. A row of tiny colorful chubby circles. I picked up the pink one and took a bite. Sweet. So sweet it made my teeth ache. My phone screen lit up. A message from Anna. Company team building event tomorrow. Are you going? I placed the macaron back into the box and replied, yeah. Chapter 19. October passed, and November arrived. The weather turned cold. I added another blanket to the apartment bed, sealed the windows with insulation strips, and placed 2 small plants on the balcony, gifts from Anna, who claimed they purified the air. Work became busier and busier. The Ito Group project entered its final stage, and I led the team through the last round of performance analysis. Anna handled the data reports. She worked overtime until 9 or 10 every night, so I started bringing her late-night snacks. You don't have to buy me food every single day, she said while taking the hot dry noodles from me. Her mouth said one thing. Her hands very honestly ripped the package open. Just happened to pass by, I said. She snorted. Oh really? Your apartment is north of the company. The snack shop is west of the company. And I live east. And you're calling that on the way? I smiled. The earth is round. Everywhere is on the way. She choked slightly on her noodles and lowered her head to keep eating. One evening in mid-November, after overtime ended, Anna and I walked out of the office together. A thin drizzle floated through the night sky. Not heavy enough to count as rain. More like mist. I didn't bring an umbrella. Neither did she. Let's wait a bit, she said while looking up at the sky. Maybe it'll stop soon. Sure. We stood side by side beneath the awning outside the office building. Leaning against the wall, streetlights shone through the rain, scattering fragments of gold across the ground. George. Yeah. That person you used to like. Her voice was soft, half swallowed by the sound of rain. Do you still like her? I looked at the curtain of rain in front of us. I don't know. What does that even mean? It's just, I thought for a moment. It feels strange. Like you spent 5 years taking care of a flower, watering it every day, giving it fertilizer, making sure it got sunlight. I paused. Then one day, the flower pot breaks apart, and you realize the roots of that flower were never planted in your soil to begin with. Anna fell silent. And then, I continued quietly. You notice another flower growing by the roadside. Nobody waters it. Nobody fertilizes it. But every morning it still blooms beautifully. And whenever you pass by, it sways its leaves at you a little. Anna turned her head to look at me. I could feel her gaze, but I didn't turn back. She asked softly. So, have you watered it yet? Not yet. Why not? I'm afraid if I water it too much. I smiled faintly. I might drown it. The rain was loud, but she still heard that sentence, because she laughed. Not loudly. Just the kind where the corners of her lips lift instinctively before she quickly presses them back down and pretends nothing happened. That metaphor was terrible, she said. I know. And comparing people to flowers is incredibly cheesy. I know. But, her voice paused. The rain became lighter. Then she said, but, if someday you decide to water it. She lowered her gaze slightly. That flower probably wouldn't mind. The moment she finished speaking, she pulled her hood over her head and dashed into the rain. Anna. She turned back and smiled at me. No need to walk me home. I'll grab a taxi. Good night. She ran over 10 meters before flagging down a cab at the roadside. The car door opened and shut. Its taillights stretched into 2 red lines before disappearing into the rainy night. I stood beneath the awning with my hands in my pockets. The corner of my mouth lifted slightly. Then I pulled out my phone and opened WeChat. There was one unread message. From Willow. She had added me again. This time, I accepted. The message itself was short. George, I figured it out. I don't regret things because you stopped chasing me. It's because after I went to France, every single night when I couldn't sleep, the person I thought about was always you. Not Makoto. Not anyone else. You said you needed time. I'll wait for you. No matter how long it takes. I stood there in the rainy night holding my phone. The streetlight above illuminated the screen as each line burned slowly into my eyes. Chapter 20. The Willow from the original story had never said anything like that before. In the original story, she reconciled with Makoto at the end. George was the one who got abandoned, the one who was forgotten, the one treated as if he had never existed at all. But this world wasn't the original story. This version of Willow, after living without George simping after her every day, finally realized who had always been standing behind her all along. I don't know if that counts as love. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe love is just something people realize far too late. You think it's only natural while you have it, and only understand its value after it's gone. But there was one thing I knew clearly. I would never return to the original storyline again. I would never again become the idiot who sacrificed everything for one person. Never again beg and grovel for pity. Never again tie my life to somebody else's story. I typed out a few lines, deleted them, typed again, deleted them again. In the end, I only sent one sentence. I've figured some things out too. Next Saturday, that noodle shop at the old place. Noon. You coming? After sending it, I locked my screen. The rain had stopped. The moon emerged from behind the clouds, spilling pale silver light across the ground. I slipped my phone into my pocket and walked into the night. The streetlights behind me stretched my shadow farther and farther, all the way into the unseen distance. 23-year-old George, inside a novel that never belonged to him, had finally walked out a path of his own. No system, no cheat like Golden Finger, no earth-shattering revenge comeback, just an ordinary person, who, after finally understanding his role, chose to stand up instead of kneeling. As for how the story ends, I don't know. The ending from the original story had already been torn apart by me. The new ending would have to be written by my own hands. Maybe it would be a fresh start with Willow, or maybe it would be a brand new story with Anna beneath the streetlights on a rainy night, or maybe it would be nothing at all. But no matter what, I, George, will never be a simp again in this lifetime. This was the awakening declaration of a former simp male supporting role, and also the final rebellion of a trashy novel character against his own fate. Rain fell softly outside the window. On the desk sat a cup of instant noodles gone cold, and a half-finished box of French macarons. My phone screen lit up. A message from Anna. Got home. The rain's way too heavy. If you catch a cold tomorrow, don't come to work. Another message followed immediately after. That flower pot got watered by the rain today. It's alive, growing pretty well, actually. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. Moonlight quietly spilled in through the window, falling across the box of macarons. Pink, purple, green, yellow, sweet, bitter, sour, spicy. Life is probably just like that. And me, I could finally choose for myself.